What if I told you that in medieval Sweden, thousands of people didn't live in houses? They lived underground, hidden beneath frozen forests and buried under layers of soil. Entire families survived in secret earth homes called Backstuga. No grand halls, no stone castles, just darkness, smoke, and the struggle to survive winter. These weren't outlaws. They weren't prisoners. They were the forgotten poor. People erased from history, forced to disappear beneath the land they could never own. Why were these homes built? Who lived inside them? And why did Sweden quietly bury the memory of them? Tonight, we descend beneath the frostbitten earth and uncover the hidden world of the Backstuga. Long before Sweden became a land of painted wooden cottages and orderly villages, there were homes that did not rise proudly above the soil. They sank into it. In the bitter centuries of medieval hardship, when land was power and power belonged to the few, the poorest people had little choice but to build where no one else wished to live. Beneath the earth itself, these hidden dwellings were called Backstuga. Small, humble homes carved into hillsides or dug straight into the frozen ground. The idea was born not from innovation, but from necessity. Winters in Sweden were merciless, stretching long and dark across the land. Timber was precious, stone expensive, and proper farmland tightly controlled by landowners and the crown. For those without property, survival demanded creativity. By digging into the earth, families could use the natural insulation of soil to shield themselves from icy winds. A simple timber frame, a sod-covered roof, and a single smoky hearth were often all that separated life from death. From a distance, these homes were almost invisible, little more than a door set into a grassy mound. No tall chimneys, no proud beams, no windows shining at dusk. They blended into the landscape as if the earth itself had swallowed them. And in many ways, it had. The Backstuga was not just a house. It was a symbol of a class pushed to the margins, living quietly beneath a society that rarely saw them at all. Life inside a Backstuga was a life lived in shadows, where daylight slipped in sparingly and the scent of smoke clung to every surface. These were not spacious dwellings but cramped earthen chambers, often consisting of a single room where entire families ate, slept, and worked together. The walls were packed soil or rough timber, damp in spring and frozen at the edges in winter. The roof, layered with sod and grass, helped hold in warmth, but it also pressed low overhead, making the space feel as though the weight of the world rested just above. Those who lived here were often the landless poor, elderly laborers, widows, disabled soldiers, or families who owned nothing but their hands and their will to survive. They worked as seasonal farmhands, herders, or craftsmen, earning scraps of food or small coins from nearby estates. In return, they were sometimes granted permission to build their Backstuga on the edge of someone else's land. Always temporary, always uncertain. Inside, the hearth was the heart of the home. A small fire provided heat, light, and the means to cook simple meals of porridge, root vegetables, or salted fish. Smoke escaped slowly through a crude vent or seeped into the roof, blackening the beams. Yet within that dim glow, stories were told, clothes were mended, and children were raised, though society barely acknowledged them. Life in the Backstuga was not empty. It was resilient, bound together by quiet endurance beneath Sweden's silent forests. In the rigid order of medieval Sweden, land defined a person's worth. To own fields was to hold power, security, and a voice in the village. But for those without inheritance or wealth, the kingdom offered little mercy. These were the people who drifted at the edges of society. Former soldiers maimed by distant wars, laborers displaced by poor harvests, widows with children and no dowry, and the elderly who could no longer work the soil. They belonged to the kingdom, yet owned no piece of it. And so they turned to the margins, carving out survival where no claim was required. The Backstuga became their quiet refuge, often built on unused corners of an estate or on rocky ground unfit for farming. Permission, when granted, was fragile and could be withdrawn at any time. The residents owed labor, loyalty, or small payments to the landowner, always aware that their shelter depended on another's favor. Their existence was tolerated rather than celebrated, necessary but invisible. Despite this uncertainty, they formed small communities of resilience. They shared tools, traded favors, and relied on one another when illness or hunger struck. Children grew up knowing both hardship and cooperation, learning early that survival was a collective effort. In a kingdom ruled by hierarchy and privilege, these landless souls forged their own quiet dignity. Though history often remembers kings and nobles, it was these unseen lives, lived half beneath the earth, that revealed the true endurance of the Swedish people. When night fell over the Swedish forests and the wind swept across the frozen fields, the Backstuga came alive in its own quiet way. Above ground, the world belonged to manor houses and timber farms, their windows glowing against the snow. But beneath the earth, behind a simple wooden door set into a grassy mound, another life flickered in firelight. The hearth crackled softly, casting trembling shadows across packed soil walls, while smoke curled upward and seeped through the sod roof into the dark sky. Inside, the air was thick with warmth and the scent of burning wood. The single room served every purpose: a place to cook, to mend tools, to cradle infants, and to whisper prayers during long winter nights. Straw pallets lined the walls, and rough wooden chests held the family's few possessions. Yet despite the simplicity, these underground homes held something stronger than timber or stone. They held stories, tales of old battles, village gossip, songs passed down through generations, and warnings about spirits said to wander the forest edge. Children listened wide-eyed as elders spoke, their voices low and steady, blending with the wind outside. In the darkness beyond the small doorway, the forest felt endless and alive. Wolves howled in the distance, and snow pressed heavily against the roof above. But within that fragile circle of firelight, there was safety. The Backstuga was more than shelter. It was a hidden world of memory and belief, glowing quietly beneath Sweden's vast and silent wilderness. As centuries passed and Sweden began to change, the world that had once forced people underground slowly transformed. Agricultural reforms reshaped the countryside. Industries rose in growing towns, and new laws redefined who could own land and where they could live. The Backstuga, once a desperate answer to survival, no longer fit the vision of a modern nation striving toward progress and order. What had been tolerated out of necessity came to be seen as a symbol of poverty the country wished to leave behind. Many who had lived in these earth-bound homes moved to cities in search of factory work, while others were relocated as estates consolidated and rural populations shifted. Some Backstuga were abandoned, their wooden doors rotting away and their sod roofs collapsing back into the soil. Nature reclaimed them quickly. Grass grew thick where smoke once rose, and forests swallowed the outlines of walls that had sheltered generations. In time, even their locations faded from memory, remembered only in old parish records and fading maps. Yet their disappearance was not just physical. It was cultural. As Sweden modernized, the story of the landless poor was rarely celebrated. History favored grand architecture and noble achievements, not the humble dwellings pressed into hillsides. And so the Backstuga slipped quietly into obscurity. But beneath fields and forests, faint impressions still remain, if one knows where to look. The earth itself remembers. These vanished homes are silent witnesses to resilience, proof that even in hardship, life endured, hidden, humble, and almost forgotten. If you are fascinated by hidden history and forgotten worlds beneath our feet, make sure to subscribe and join the journey. There are many more untold medieval secrets waiting to be uncovered.